Hey, I'm Lana from Lana Glowshot Art, and in this video, we'll be unboxing the September 2025 SketchBox. This box is all about working with earth tones, and I'll show you some really cool mixed media technique. Ready to get into it? Let's go. The surface in this month's box is the toned watercolor paper by Hanamule. This beige color allows you to work with both light and dark colors right from the start, and its cold press texture handles a wide range of wet and dry media. Next, we have the SketchBox Signature Woodless Pastel Pencils. Your 6 pastel pencils are filled with natural earth pigments and are great for detail work. Your natural colors include kale, umber, terracotta, platinum, which is great for highlights and lighter tones, mustard, and olive. Let's start with a horizon line and a vanishing point and practice the 1-point perspective that we learned in August. Here I'm lightly blocking in a kite that I would see at the beach, and then I'm using a scratch piece of paper to bring each edge to the vanishing point. This allows me to estimate about how big each kite would be as they move further back in space. I could stack a bunch right on top of each other, but that won't be very dynamic. So instead I'm going to measure this distance and move it over to the right. Then I'll draw one more kite and scooch it over to the left. Using perspective in this way allows me to create accurate depth and a convincing sense of space in my drawing. With a light sketch of my beach laid in, I can now come in and start building up the color. And I began with terracotta and that kite that is closest to us in space. With the sun being my light source up above the kite, I used mustard to lighten the top portion and umber to create shadows underneath. Throughout this piece, I'm using the photo reference as a jumping off point or for inspiration, but I'm not copying it exactly. As I continue to build up my drawing, I'm working from the background forward, and I go ahead and use platinum around the kites to create a stronger contrast and a lighter value in the sky. Then in those hills or cliffs in the background, I have the very furthest one being a lighter value color with that olive mixed with platinum, and the one right in front of it slightly darker. To maximize the depth in your own landscape drawings, keep those elements in the background with a very soft contrast. Think grayer colors and less jumps between light and dark. Then, when you progress into the foreground, you're looking to achieve more contrast between your colors. So here you might place a dark next to a light, as I'm doing in these grasses in the foreground. Another tip for landscape drawings is to have warm colors in the foreground and then to cool off your colors as they progress backwards, which is what I'm doing here with the terracotta pastel, bringing the foreground further towards the viewer. Next, we have a custom paint set by Schmincke with liquid charcoal and liquid earth. Our liquid earth colors are chalk and sanguine, and our liquid charcoal is cherry pit black. And we'll apply these paints onto our paper with the SketchBox Signature Tri-Wedge Brush size 8. This is a really interesting brush tip that is going to allow us to create a variety of different marks. Liquid chalk is almost transparent when applied on its own, but as it dries, it will get a little bit lighter in value. Liquid chalk is made with limestone dust, whereas the sanguine is made with iron-rich clay. Finally, we have cherry pit black, which is made by burning cherry pits and grinding them down into a powdered charcoal, then combining them with a liquid binding agent. All of these incredibly special pigments are mined regionally in Germany. Here I have combined the cherry pit black with the sanguine for a warm, rich brown, and I'm going to create a gradient from this darker color to a color closer to sanguine. By adding water to the pigments on my paper, I'm able to soften the transition really smoothly. And then as I move towards the bottom, I'm combining sanguine with liquid chalk for a lighter, more transparent wash of color. After smoothing out the transition, I allow this to dry completely, and then I swatch my pastel pencils over the top so I can see how these colors read over different colored backgrounds. Keeping this swatch card handy will be incredibly helpful as you pick colors for your mixed media pieces this month. Let's go ahead and put all of these supplies together as we paint this grass blowing in the wind. I began again with a combination of the Cherry Pit Black and Sanguine. I absolutely love this combination. And I lightened this color with the liquid chalk as I moved up towards the top of the page. Once this was established, I came in below the horizon line with a mixture of liquid sanguine and liquid chalk. This does not have to be perfect because the pastels are going to be going over it. With a more watered down version of the Cherry Pit Charcoal and the liquid sanguine, I came in with the very tip of my tri-wedge brush and I mapped in the stalks of these large pieces of grass with that wheat shape up at the top. Now I can come in with my pastel pencils, which are great for adding details, and they stick so beautifully to the textured liquid earth and liquid charcoal. I began with mustard so that I could get my lights established, and then I came in with olive and kale so that I could expand my palette a little bit more and add those greens into the grass. I ended up using just about every color in the grass to create a really rich, vibrant texture. Play around with the colors you like best and don't stress out about there having to be a perfect order. This is an artistic, organic process. After I was pretty happy with the way that my grass was flowing in the wind, I came in with platinum to help refine the shape a bit more. This is a process of working negatively where I am using the background to shape the foreground, and it is a great process with any kind of opaque material, especially pastels. In those areas where I didn't want the pastel to be completely opaque, I used my finger to gently smudge them, and I was able to create this really nice atmospheric effect. The prompt for this month is Take Flight, which inspired the kites and the windy pieces that we've looked at so far. Now let's use all of our materials and some more advanced techniques to draw an owl. As always, I start with basic shapes, and here I'm using the terracotta so that the image shows up on my page, but it's still easy to refine and adjust my marks if needed. Once the basic structure is mapped in, I get more and more specific. Here I'm utilizing a midline to draw the owl's face symmetrically, and then I'm going into the body and looking at the shadow shapes and the texture and structure of the feathers. Remember that we are working with layers of material, so this doesn't have to be perfect. But once you're happy with your sketch, you can begin to come in with your liquid earths and liquid charcoal. Here I'm using a watered down combination of sanguine and chalk to map in the lightest areas of the bird. And then I use a more concentrated version of the sanguine, so adding less water, to add in a brighter pop of color to the top of the head and to the front of the wing. Now it's time for the shadow shapes, and I'm using a watered down version of Cherry Pit Black and Sanguine to get me a deep, rich brown that I can add to the shadows along the left side of the face and the body. For the background, I want a really dark, rich color. So here I'm using the Cherry Pit Charcoal with just the tiniest bit of sanguine, and that sanguine just warms it up a little bit so that it feels very cohesive with the rest of the drawing. Then as I move into the lighter parts of the background, I can add more water or I can add in the liquid chalk. Just like our grass piece, the background doesn't need to be perfect. We are just establishing some dark, rich color that we can come into later with our pastel pencils. Once your paint is completely dry, it's time to come in with the pastel pencils. Here, I'm really utilizing the platinum for those lightest values in the bird. And yes, this isn't a true white, but that's the beauty of a modified or a limited palette. You're going to make adjustments and find the best fit rather than looking for something that is a perfect match. These kind of limited palette exercises allow you to push your creativity and your color mixing skills. And they are a big part of my personal practice as an artist. As I work on this piece, I bounce back and forth between the bird and the background so that everything feels really cohesive. I'm adding in that darker umber to push the background a little bit darker, and then I'm bringing in terracotta, mustard, and even some olive into the bird. Adding olive over those really bright, rich red oranges allows me to neutralize the color and make it a little bit less saturated. If you're having a hard time picking a color that will match what you're drawing, focus on value rather than color. So pay attention to how light or dark an area is. As you work on finishing up the background, remember those lessons that we talked about earlier in the video. To create a nice sense of depth and space, you're going to want those areas furthest away from the viewer to be slightly out of focus and to have less contrast. You'll also use your cooler colors the further away you go. So as I worked on this piece, I saved the kale and the platinum mixtures for the background, and then as I came forward, I used kale and more contrast with my terracotta to create that sense of depth and space. You don't need to draw every strand of grass for it to look like grass. Play around with blending with your fingers and allowing some things to be unfinished. And now this piece is complete. I hope you learned a ton about working with pastel pencils and earth tones, and we can't wait to see what you create. So be sure to use the hashtag SketchBoxSeptember when you post your work online. For more unboxing videos and tutorials, you can check out our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.